All right, guys, today we are going to take some of what we've learned on our color wheels and apply those in a little bit more complex and detailed way. So you should see kind of a template for this at your table. You're going to draw this on your own paper. We won't have copies like we did for our color wheel. Please pay attention to all of the different parts and how many boxes are on each thing, and I'll be coming around to help you as you do that. But once you get this set up, we are going to first start with our value scale. So I want you to remember what we learned about with our value scales. We talked about that in our Artist Observe unit. It is the transition from light to dark. You will notice too in your brush pack, there are these smaller flat brushes added. We will use that today, not on this, but we'll use that in a little bit. But we're also still gonna be using our number 10 or number 12 round brush as well. So you should have your palette, your water, your paint brushes, and your paper towel all in front of you. So we're gonna start with tint, which tint is adding white to a hue. So this is a new word. This hue word is just kind of another interchangeable way to say color. So tint is adding white to a color. Now in watercolor, we don't actually have white, but we do have our water and the white of our paper. So that's what we're going to use to create those different values. So I'm starting to mix up some of my red. I'm just gonna use red for this one in my pan. You can use whichever color you want. I would maybe not use yellow just because it's kind of hard to see sometimes when we're doing this kind of stuff. So once you have it mixed up, I'm going to create a nice even layer of water on my scale to start. Okay, you don't want it like pooling up, but you want enough on there that your water will move. This is similar to what we did on our technique chart, where you're gonna start with the dark on this side and then let it kind of slowly move down. Okay, so remember, if you feel like it's too dark, you can kind of pull some of that color down. And don't be afraid to dry off your brush and kind of pull up some of that pigment with your brush. Okay, so that's a good start. So I have my tint. Oops, I might want to rework some of it a little bit later, but that's okay. A nice even transition from a solid hue to a lighter hue. So now we're gonna work with shade. So shade can get kind of tricky. It's adding black. I want y'all to know that black is probably the strongest of any color that you'll mix in, so you really don't need a ton. So I'm gonna start this one off very similarly to how I started the tint. I'm gonna add a nice layer of water. I'm gonna start with my true red to this on this side and then move it to that black on this side. So I need to get my palette set up. So again, my favorite tip is to always keep black in this small little guy because that kind of helps keep it nice and clean so you don't get black mixed into your other stuff. Okay, so I'm gonna just do a nice even wash of red. And then it truly doesn't take much. Like I'm dipping my brush and just getting a little bit on there. So then you'll see how dark that's starting to be, and then you can just slowly work it into that red. Okay, so now what I'm gonna show you guys is the warm and cool colors. We'll come back to this mixing our brown. So on the warm and cool colors, you wanna think about the two distinct sides of the color wheel. So we have our reds over here through our yellow and yellow-green. This half is considered the warm colors. This half is considered the cool colors. Now, I've mentioned the word bias to you before. So I talked to you about that the other day when we were doing these color wheels. This is where you'll really want to start paying attention to that. So you'll notice that this yellow-green, that green is actually a cool color, but since this yellow-green has more yellow in it than it does green, it actually has a warm bias. So the same thing with this violet red. It's kind of questionable whether that's going to be a warm bias or a cool bias. You kind of have to decide based on how you've mixed it. But you can definitely start kind of seeing how different colors can have a warm bias or a cool bias. And that means it favors one side or the other. So in order to warm colors, this is fairly simple. So I'm just gonna make a little red dot right here just so I can remember what these are. I'm gonna go ahead and grab some yellow. So do a nice little yellow right here, nothing crazy. And then I'm gonna mix my orange. So pull some of your yellow in. Remember how we were mixing in our trays? And then pull some red in. Okay. So we have some of our warm colors there. Okay. That's a little better. Okay, now our cool colors are gonna be our blues, purples, and greens. Green is kind of a funny one because it's made up of that red and that blue. So you just kind of have to pay attention to what bias it has and where it kind of favors that side of the color wheel. So let's get green. Green. And then we'll mix up our purple. There we go. Okay. Awesome. So we have our warm colors and our cool colors. Okay, so now we are going to look at this mixing of our brown. Since we are not going to be using our secondary colors or the brown in our palette, that's kind of the expectation, we are going to want to learn how to mix our brown. So I've cleaned out this part of my tray and my palette. And so I'm going to kind of show you all the steps that I like to take to mix a brown. So I like to first make a nice orange. The idea behind this is that you're gonna mix together all the primary colors, but in order to get the brown that I feel like is a good base for you to have, I like to mix up a good orange. So start with orange instead of just adding them all together at one time. So start with an orange, and then I like to slowly add in some blue. And you'll see that starting to turn. Now, if it's looking a little bit more gray, feel free to kind of play with, do you need more red or do you need more yellow in there? But that's kind of how I tend to like to go about mixing up my brown. So I am going to, and you want to make sure you're getting enough pigment on there. This is honestly a little too light, but you can kind of see the base of my brown that I'm gonna have. Okay, so I mixed my brown. Now we're gonna start using our small flat brush just to start getting some practice for this. And we're gonna talk about our different color schemes. So the first is monochromatic. Monochromatic is made up of tints and shades of the same hue. So let's work with blue. So on my first box, I'm just gonna do a true blue. So even though we could use our round brush for this, I kind of want you guys to start getting used to playing with different brushes and see how this can kind of have a little bit cleaner lines, even on that wet and wet technique. Okay, so I have my monochromatic right there. And now I'm going to add a little bit of black to my blue. So I've kind of started that in my tray right here. So just a little. And this is creating a shade, if you recall. Okay, and now I'm gonna do a light tint of blue. So you might notice with this flat brush, you have a little bit more control. As to where that color goes, which is kind of nice at times. So there's a lighter tint of blue. Okay. And then I will add, so it's almost like a value scale in a way. But you'll definitely see some differences in it. So you kind of want to play with how you mix that stuff together. Okay, so monochromatic, tints and shades of the same hue. And now we're going to talk about analogous. So analogous is where you will have, and a monochromatic can also kind of have this feel too. So definitely like a lighter type look. So on analogous, it is 3 colors. I like to kind of stick to 3 because if you start adding in more, it gets kind of confusing. But any 3 colors that are directly next to each other on the color wheel. So we're going to do this red, and violet to show this one. So color schemes and color rules are essentially what colors look good together, what colors go well together, visually pleasing to the eye. So this is kind of to help guide the way that your artwork looks or the way that you combine colors and different things like that. Okay, and then we are going to do a triad. So a triad is any 3 colors that are next to each other, or pardon me, that is any 3 colors that are equidistant apart. So think like the primary colors, so yellow, red, blue. We're not gonna do that, but what we are gonna do is we're gonna do a yellow green, a blue violet, and a red orange to kind of show that. So again, I'm gonna start with my brush, or my flat brush. So this is a blue violet for this first one. Blue violet, and then we're gonna do a red orange. For the second one. And then, so if I have my blue violet, red, orange, and then yellow, green. That's right. So blue, violet, red, orange, and then yellow, green. And then last but not least, we're gonna talk about our complementary colors. So these are any colors that are directly across from each other on the color wheel. So I'm gonna just do the primaries and secondaries. So we're gonna say red, green, blue, orange, and then violet, yellow. So all you're gonna do on these is just put a tiny little dot of those colors. So red, and then I have some of my green mixed up over here, green. Okay. Then I'm gonna do orange, It's kind of a yellow orange. Blue. Okay. And then yellow. And purple. So I have some of that purple mixed up right over here. Okay. So now we have all our different color rules and color schemes. You'll keep this in your sketchbook so you can refer back to it, but these are two really handy charts. So in review, tint, shade, mixing brown, warm, cool, monochromatic, analogous, triad, and complementary.